Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host Anthony Sassano and it's the 13th of January 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So first up today, we have Ben Edgington's quick notes from the Ethereum, the latest Ethereum consensus layer call, also now known as ACDC, abbreviated there, which I thought was a pretty cool abbreviation. But essentially, there's quite a bit of notes here that Ben has put together that you should definitely go check out. They discussed things like Shanghai, obviously, and the test nets for withdrawals and things like that, which you can read all about here. Some issues, I think, with certain technical things, which are also discussed here. They also talked about 4844, as you can see, with a quick client status update. And, I mean, the status updates are here, but just to read out some of them, Lighthouse said that they're passing all but the one test. Prism is similar. Lodestar as well. Besu, I think, is pretty similar with some pieces to add. Nimbus as well. And Teku as well. So, I mean, they're all pretty much passing the test, doing well, doing what they need to be doing, which is great to see. There's some updates on research, specs, etc., and a highlight section that Ben has actually put together with chat highlights from the actual, I guess, chat that happens at the same time as the call, the text chat. So, as I said, you can go check this out for yourself and read all about it. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. The funny thing is about the, I guess, consensus layer and execution layer calls, or execution implementers calls and the consensus implementers calls, is that they happen quite frequently, and you'll get the notes of them, but you can miss a lot of things. Like, I read through the notes, but I still miss things or forget things, and this really is the place to get all the latest alpha of what's happening in Ethereum. If you want to be up to date, fully on Ethereum, at least the core protocol layer, these calls are where to be. And if you want to be as up to date as possible, you can watch the call yourself on YouTube via the live stream, basically at time that it happens. Now, depending where you are in the world, obviously it may work out for you, it may not when it's happening. But yeah, it's kind of amazing that you get like this, I guess, deep insight into the core protocol work via a live stream, and you get to follow along really, really closely. And that's why, especially leading up to the merge, I kept telling you guys, I'm like, guys, like, the merge is here, it's coming. This is happening with the merge, and same with withdrawals. I'm like, this is where we're at today. I just go through the notes. I don't watch the streams myself because they're at an inconvenient time for me, and I prefer to just read because it's a much easier and faster way for me to digest information. But that's all I do, really. I just read the notes and keep reading them as they come out. Make sure that I'm on top of everything, talk to any relevant people, talk to friends about it, and keep up with it and be able to, I guess, translate that for you guys on the refuel. Now, obviously, you all have the benefit of the refuel, where I've already done all the hard work for you. That's the whole point of what I do. But yeah, I mean, just behind the scenes, there's a lot of, I guess, research that goes into it, because keeping up with this stuff can be difficult, even though we have everything available to us. As I said, we have the notes, we have the live streams, things like that, but it can be quite time consuming and difficult. So yeah, but in saying that, if you wanted to, I guess, go to the source yourself, you can always do that. I always link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. You don't have to wait for me to cover it on the refuel, or maybe I miss it one day. It's good to get used to going to the source as well of yourself to make sure that I haven't gotten anything wrong if you've heard about it on the refuel, or you just want to learn more about it, as I always encourage you guys to do. So yeah, anyway, check out this one in the YouTube description below. All right, so Optimism has completed a successful upgrade of the Optimism Goerli testnet to Bedrock. Deposits and withdrawals are re-enabled, and the Optimism Goerli sequencer is back up and running. And they said here, big thanks to all our partners for their support in making this migration possible. So obviously this was the big step that needed to happen before they can deploy Bedrock to mainnet, which seems like it was still coming Q1, which is great to see. They did say Q4 originally, but obviously, they had to do a bit more work to get this ready, but it seems like the fact that it's live on the Goerli testnet, the Optimism Goerli testnet now, seems like it is going to happen in Q1, which I've really been looking forward to, because I think right now, Arbitrum and Optimism are pretty much the front runners of the Layer 2 space. I mean, we all know that, right? And there is a healthy competition between them, but I think Arbitrum has the upper hand right now with their Nitro implementation, right? So once Optimism, I guess, implements Bedrock, I think they're going to be maybe more so neck and neck than they are today, which is great for everyone, because as I've said plenty of times on the refuel, and I've said this on Twitter as well, like, a protocol or a project having a monopoly isn't necessarily a good thing from a competition perspective. And there are certain protocols that have something that looks like a monopoly on Ethereum today. For example, Uniswap, and they're an exception because they do innovate and they innovate a lot. And they're still pushed to innovate via other means. But if a protocol has, or a project has a monopoly, a total monopoly, something that basically has 90+% market share, there's not really much incentive for them to, I guess, build more, for them to do more, because they don't have the competition pushing them to do that. So the competition is very, very healthy, especially when it comes to generalized platforms like Optimism and Arbitrum, where they're fighting for a community. I mean, we know that these platforms, whether they be layer 1s or layer 2s, a lot of the time they live or die based on what community they're able to cultivate. Now, the best communities in crypto are the ones that are full of missionaries and not mercenaries, as I've explained before, because as we've seen plenty of times, there are certain platforms, especially with the L1 space or the layer 1 space, where they'll gather up a community of mercenaries, and those people will only last as long as the money is flowing, which is where, what happens in the bull market. Then once that goes away, they're gone straight away, and there's very few, if any, missionaries left to pick up the pieces and to get things going again. And I think, I've personally experienced this with Ethereum, because Ethereum only had missionaries after the ICO boom to get it through that slog of 2018, 2019, and part of 2020. And I think that layer 2s are following the same path, where they're cultivating their community, but they're wanting to cultivate a community that is full of missionaries instead of mercenaries. And it can be quite difficult to do, especially because if you have a token, it distorts things. If you don't have a token, it also distorts things from people trying to farm stuff. You never know who's going to be in it for the long term versus not. It's basically, you basically just have to play it out, right? And depending on I guess, the culture that you set as well as part of your community and part of your platform, that can dictate things too. So taking all that on board, I think Optimism and Arbitrum are doing a really great job. I think both of their communities are quite organic, quite missionary versus mercenary, but at the same time, they do have mercenaries in there, because there are people farming a potential second OP airdrop, for example, right? And there are people farming a potential Arbitrum airdrop. So there are going to be those people. They're not necessarily bad. I think the way I look at the mercenaries, if there's a healthy chunk of missionaries, I actually view the mercenaries as net positive. Because what they do is they bring in all this new capital and money, which should, in theory, I guess, reward the missionaries for being early believers, right? Like maybe the token goes up and they're holding a bunch of the token, or maybe they're holding tokens of the projects on the actual layer 2, for example, or any other such means of where they're rewarded. I think that's where it can be a positive. But if your ecosystem is just all mercenaries and they're only around when the money's good and then they're gone when it's not, well, then your ecosystem is going to fail. And that's actually what I look at when I look at a lot of these other ecosystems. And that's not the only thing. I think it's a big part, but it's not the only thing of how these things live and die. And I've noted before that I think there are certain select few ecosystems outside of Ethereum that have a missionary-driven community, but I don't know, well, I don't think that that's going to be enough to make them long-term sustainable, to make them carve out anything but maybe a niche. And even then, it'd be quite hard to do. And some of those ecosystems include something like Cosmos, for example, but I've been very critical of Cosmos's design and how I don't think it actually lends itself to value capture for the Atom token, which has its own host of problems. But Cosmos as a community, from what I've seen, seems to have a lot of missionaries in there that really do care about building the tech out to their vision. Even if I don't agree with their vision, still they have those missionaries there. I think I've been seeing a little bit of missionary activity in the Solana ecosystem, but 95% plus was mercenaries. It remains to be seen if they can cultivate that missionary, I guess, like community, missionary-driven community, and turn that into something more than it is today. Again, I disagree with the architecture of Solana. I don't think it's long-term sustainable from that perspective, but it doesn't matter if I can give credit where it's due, right? They have a small little missionary community there. There are some other platforms as well that I've seen, but it's kind of hard because a lot of these platforms are quite young as well. All the older layer 1s don't really have any. Obviously, Bitcoin does, but Bitcoin's not the smart contract layer 1, so it's in its own kind of a niche there, for instance. But that's how I view these things. And as I said, having a missionary driven community, or having a community full of missionaries, I should say, is an important thing, but it's not the only thing. It's not going to save you if your architecture is wrong, if your monetary policy is wrong, if your, I guess, value capture for the token is wrong. So for example, I mean, using the example here that I just used before, Cosmos has a missionary community full of missionaries, but their token value accrual is pretty bad. Their architecture in my eyes is pretty bad, and their vision for how they see the crypto space playing out is not one that I agree with. So from that perspective, I think the market has shown that as well, is that like they're always trailing far behind even the other ecosystems, even the newer ones, because of that, I believe. But maybe they turn that around in the future. Maybe they build something that actually appeals to people and is actually sustainable. There are some projects here and there popping up. I think Canto is one of them, made by Scott Lewis, he's one of the founders. He's a good friend of mine. And there's a few other things popping up as well. But I think Terra really set the Cosmos ecosystem back. Even though Terra, I mean, really just used the Cosmos technology, but wasn't really part of it. It was kind of this funny thing, right? But there is something there in terms of missionaries. But as I said, it's not enough. You need to have more than that. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here. I'm going to end that discussion there for now. But if you've got thoughts on that, please let me know. I'm always interested to hear other people's takes on that stuff, because I don't want to be viewed as someone who's just like dictating to people what they should think. I'm always up for discussion about these things. All right, so Ryan Wyatt here from the Polygon team put out a tweet where he said some huge tech updates on the Polygon front. zkEVM, so this is an update related to zkEVM. The final public testnet is now up and running. It's coming years sooner than anyone expected. And I've talked about this before, about how obviously Polygon has their zkEVM testnet up and they're having their final public testnet up. And it is coming much earlier than people expected, which is great to see. And then also there's going to be a hard fork on the POS chain to reduce the severity of the gas spikes and addresses chain reorgs to reduce the chain finality, which I think is also pretty cool. In saying that, right, like the funny thing about layer 2s versus layer 1s is that like these layer 1s are much harder to scale because of things like, you know, these potential gas spikes, especially if it's EVM based, right? Reorgs and finality time and things like that. So I think even the technical team at Polygon will be saying, you know, hey, we really would love to move the POS chain to a layer 2 because it would just be easier to work with. But for now, they have to keep maintaining and upgrading the POS chain because there's a lot of users there, there's a lot of people using it, getting value out of it. But in my eyes, it's definitely not going to be long-term kind of sustainable or the long-term solution. I'm sure they're going to want to bring that over and will transform it into a zkEVM as fast as possible. Or what might end up happening, which is probably going to take a while to play out. If it does play out, people just naturally migrate over to Polygon zkEVM instead of being on the POS chain, and essentially the POS chain just basically dies out in favor of Polygon zkEVM, which would be pretty cool as well. But that's a tall order, I think. I think it would be probably much easier for them just to convert the POS chain into a zkEVM rather than waiting for users to migrate across. Remains to be seen how that plays out, but I think users migrating across will take a lot longer than them just, I guess, converting the chain here. All right, so speaking of layer 2s, Aztec has put out a little tweet here making fun of the bears being in disbelief as encrypted blockchains become the narrative catalyst of 2023. And this is a little TVL chart that they're showing here. They're up to around 15 million TVL. Now, obviously, this is nothing to, I guess, write home about. 15 million TVL is very small, but what I think is really cool is that it's growing, right? There is a trend here, as you can see on the chart, of consistent growth in the TVL here. And on top of that, I'm not entirely sure if they still have caps in place, because they originally did of caps for per address, I believe, of how much money could be deposited here. And Aztec is still in very early stages on their layer 2, on their privacy preserving layer 2 as well. But what I think is cool is the trend. The trend is up. That's what we want to see. It doesn't matter if it's only 15 million. The trend is our friend here. And you can actually follow along with this dashboard on DeFi Llama, which is here. Yeah, you can see the trend for yourself. You can kind of, I guess, scroll over it and see at different points in time what happened here. So basically from when I believe in October, that's when they kind of set their mainnet live or had a more open mainnet, and they've just been consistently on an up-only trend since then, which is great to see. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Aztec. I did mention that they changed their branding a bit from like a privacy protocol to an encrypted blockchain, so to speak. But don't let the term blockchain fool you here. They are a layer 2 on Ethereum. And technically a layer 2 is a blockchain, right? Like it's its own thing, but it just outsources its consensus and slash security to Ethereum layer 1, but it can still be referred to as a blockchain. And I saw some people get confused about this when Aztec did their recent funding announcement, and they did their rebrand. They're like, Aztec is an encrypted blockchain, and they didn't say like layer 2 or roll up, I don't believe, or at least they use the encrypted blockchain terminology a lot more. And I think that's a lot got to do with them going for two reasons. I think the first reason is that they want to change the narrative here. They want to change from the narrative around privacy to encryption because, as I've discussed before, it seems to be a much more palatable term for the mainstream. And they also want to catch the attention of, I believe, businesses and enterprises to come work with, build on, and use Aztec's technology. That's what I got from their, I guess, kind of announcement a few weeks ago. But regardless of that, just great to see the upward trend here on Aztec. Just layer 2 season continuing into 2023. All right, so Aura Labs here today announced that they're launching Dune.aura.so, which is a website, which is a new search experience for Dune Analytics powered by LLMs. So now you can find dashboards by describing what you're looking for, like how's DEX activity on ETH, rather than relying on keyword matches. So let's try that. If I copy paste this, how's DEX activity on ETH, and then type it into the search bar here, and then just click enter. Let's see what pops up here. They're searching for dashboards. There you can go. You can see ETH DEX activity dashboard popped up straight away from just using natural language, which is very, very cool. And then it links to the Dune Analytics dashboard there. Maybe if I say, but what was the question? How's DEX activity on Ethereum? How's layer 2 growth? Let's see what happens when I type that in. Layer 2 adoption is the first one that they've come up with here from Markov, and you can see the layer 2 growth charts here. Very cool. I like this. I like this natural language processing that's going on here. So yeah, just something cool that I wanted to highlight for you guys, because you guys know I'm a huge fan of Dune Analytics, use them a lot, and I do sometimes have trouble finding the relevant dashboards. So this is definitely a tool that I'm going to get a lot of use out of, I think, but something that you might get a lot of use out of as well. I would love to see this expanded beyond analytics dashboards as well. Could you imagine having I guess a Google of DeFi where you could just type in, I want to get such and such yield, or the best, say you say, I want to get the best yield on my US dollar stablecoins, and then it will pop up with all these results. I remember there being something like this in the works, if not live. I remember covering it a while ago. I can't remember the name of it, but imagine having that, right? Just having that nice little Google for on-chain stuff, basically. And it doesn't even have to be limited to DeFi. You could basically type in, register a ENS name such and such for X amount of years, and then it automatically processes that in the background for you, and then you just sign the transaction and confirm it and pay the fees or whatever. And then maybe you say, hey, find me the latest trending NFT collections on Ethereum or on Arbitrum or on Optimism. So I really hope that someone's working on that, and if they are, please let me know, because I don't know of any that's working on it, and I've forgotten if there are people that are working on that kind of natural language Google-like search processing for on-chain activity. But that would be really cool to see. But anyway, you can go check out this one for Dune Analytics. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Rated.network, one of my favorite websites for tracking metrics around Ethereum staking, has brought out a new kind of page here called Trending. So you can go to Rated.network/trending to see what this is all about. And what this is about is basically showing you different metrics around the performance and effectiveness and APR of the top 5 operators and the bottom 5 operators. So at the top, you can see top 5 operators by effectiveness, and this is identified operators. And you can see that Kukas Global here, with around 2,500 validators, has an effectiveness of 98.3%, which means that they are extremely good at testing to blocks, proposing blocks, being part of sync committees, and just all around doing the job that they should be doing. And then you can see the bottom 5% here, with Figment at the top, around 7,000 validators with an effectiveness of 93%. Now, that's not actually too bad, right? I mean, and then the rest of them are around 96% plus, and there are usually specific events that happen or specific reasons why this is like this. So yeah, even the bottom five doesn't look too bad there. But then you can keep scrolling down. You can see the top five operators by deposit address, the top five validators by effectiveness. So this all nodes validator here it has a 99.1% effectiveness, which is pretty crazy. And then you can see the bottom five validators by effectiveness. Obviously, they're going to be 0% because there are a bunch of validators that are basically just sitting there. They're not withdrawn, they're not slashed, they're not exited because they kind of can't be yet. But I don't know. I think they can be exited. I just don't think you can withdraw the assets. But there are some that just sit there on 0% for whatever reason. And then you can go down the bottom and see by MEV facilitated. So the top five operators by that and bottom five. And then by slashing history, see which operators have been slashed the most. Staked.us has been slashed 92 times, which is pretty, I guess it's funny because like they're almost double the second place here, but they have 13,500 validators. So yeah, I mean they have a lot of validators there, and then you can see the top five operators by slashes collected. So this is pretty cool, seeing which operators are collecting the money for slashing another validator here. So very, very cool to see this new page from Raider.network, which you can check out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, to round out the last 10 minutes here, I have two tweets that I'm going to be focusing on. So I'll try and spend 5 minutes on each. But basically, this is a tweet from me. I said yesterday, the Ethereum ecosystem onboarding real-world assets into DeFi is going to lead to a huge amount of legitimacy for the Ethereum network. The outside world will shift from viewing Ethereum as a quote-unquote toy to viewing it as a major upgrade to existing systems and institutions. Now, I got a bit of pushback on this. I did read through the replies. I didn't reply to all of them, but I did read through them. But I want to start off this discussion by defining what a real-world asset is. The way I define it is basically anything that's not native to a blockchain, specifically in this case, the Ethereum blockchain. So what is that? That is US dollar stablecoins as the prime example, centralized US dollar stablecoins, I should say. USDT and USDC are not native to Ethereum. They can only exist in IOU form, but they represent a real world asset. They represent dollars in a bank account, right? Or treasuries or whatever other assets are backing them. That's what they represent. So those are the obvious examples. But then there are other things that are being brought on chain by a number of different projects, including things like stocks and bonds and property deeds and really anything that you can think of that either has value or doesn't necessarily have to have value, but these are things that I would consider real world assets. Now, because they are not digitally native to Ethereum, they weren't issued on Ethereum, they will never exist in a form where Ethereum will be the settlement layer for them. The ultimate settlement layer for those things will be the off-chain ecosystem, right? So for example, the ultimate settlement layer for stocks and would be the stock exchange that is using Ethereum and issuing them on Ethereum, or the broker, or the company that's doing them. That will be that might not be the ultimate settlement there, but they are the responsible for settling those and settling them in the off-chain world. So does that mean that they're valueless? Does that mean that we shouldn't bring them to Ethereum? No, not at all. We definitely should, and we have proof that they're a big deal because of the stablecoins that are a big deal. Now, the pushback that I got on this idea was that Dan McArdle said here, it's probably what I said is probably true, but real-world assets are ultimately a major source of centralization, risk, and an easy attack vector for governance, which definitely is true. Like, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But then I said, we're kidding ourselves if we think we can replace the existing financial system without onboarding real-world assets. So there is going to be a kind of, I wouldn't call it like a split, but there will be two kind of types of DeFi and on-chain finance. There'll be the type that is completely native to Ethereum, where it's all got to do with assets issued natively on Ethereum, and Ethereum secures and settles those assets. So ETH and ERC20 tokens and NFTs, things like that, right? Or NFTs that are issued on Ethereum, not NFTs that represent real-world assets, right? And same with ERC20 tokens. But then you're going to have all these real-world assets, which are de facto centralized because they cannot be decentralized because they're part of a company that's issued them as IOUs or some other institution that's done this and brought them on chain. But it's still a centralized thing. So I totally understand the risk here. but there is no way we're going to be able to replace the existing financial system without onboarding these assets. I mean, it's required for the financial system to function, right? So that's why I think that they're very much needed, and they will also add legitimacy to the Ethereum network, because it will upgrade Ethereum, as I said, from looking like a toy, which it has in the past, because Ethereum to the outside world definitely looks like a toy. It looks like a machine for Ponzi's and for speculation. But by bringing real world assets on chain, we start showing the outside world like, hey, you can do legitimate everyday things on Ethereum that you would do in the, I guess, traditional finance system, but now you can do it on Ethereum. You can do it in a non-custodial way, right? You can do it at the speed of basically the internet, right? Or the speed of Ethereum, whether that's at layer 1 or layer 2, and you don't have to wait all this time. You don't have to deal with all this crappy old world infrastructure. You have these new rails that you can deal with. And then the other note of pushback I got, rather than the centralization concerns, was people saying that they don't think that real-world assets are going to be necessarily popular. And I'm like, what do you mean? There are over $100 billion worth of centralized stablecoins today. That is a real-world asset. They're incredibly popular. Centralized stablecoins are probably, or stablecoins in general, I should say, are probably the number one use case for blockchains today. I mean, they are used by everyone. Like literally, I'm sure literally all of you have used a stablecoin. Doesn't matter which one it is, but I'm sure all of you have used that one at least once, right? In your journey within crypto. I've used them hundreds, if not thousands of times to do all manner of things. Like probably thousands of times at this point, right? And you know, before that, the only time I ever touched US dollars was when I was going to the US and I maybe got some cash, right? Or I was doing a conversion with typing my card, but that's not the same thing. But with having US dollar exposure on chain, it's much easier for me to get access to it as an Australian citizen, and much easier for me to interact with it. And I get to do it at the speed of crypto, which is much faster than TradFi. And I get to, the practical use case that I have is that I get to send money to people without having to go through a wire, right? And I can send it to them, like obviously I could send it to them in ETH, but I would like to send it to them in a stable asset. I don't want to send them my ETH, so I send US dollars to them. To do that via a wire would take from Australia to someone in the US over a wire, I think takes at least 3 days, and I have no visibility over that. And I've discussed this before on the refuel, where I basically said zero visibility over this. I basically have to pray that it gets there, whereas in crypto, I can do it in one block. I have full visibility of the life cycle of the transaction, and then I have settlement guarantees that Ethereum gives me that the recipient has got that. So it's great for both parties there. So to those who say that it's not going to be a big deal, that real-world assets are not going to be a big deal, I challenge you to tell me why we have over $100 billion worth of centralized stablecoins right now on Ethereum, Layer 2s, and some other blockchains out there. But anyway, I'm going to leave that one at that. I'm running out of time. Wanted to talk about this last thread here from Tim Robinson, who is a Daily Gwei Discord native. So he starts off this thread by saying, we still don't have digital cash, and no, the thing you are thinking of right now is not digital cash. Here's what digital cash means. And he defines digital cash as something that has no company, no login, no seed phrase, no address book, no account numbers, no traceability, and no gatekeepers. It's cash. It should function exactly like cash, and we have the tools to build it today, but nobody has taken on the challenge. And then he just starts to describe how this could work. Now, you may be wondering, exactly why what we currently have is not considered digital cash. Well, so say for example, you spin up something like a MetaMask wallet, you add some ETH to it. Okay, well, you have a login for that. Technically, I mean, it's not a login for your private key, but it's a login for the MetaMask extension, but you still have a login, right? You have a seed phrase, you have an address book, you have account numbers, so to speak, right? You have traceability, and there's no gatekeepers, but there is traceability there because of the fact that it's not private on Ethereum Layer 1 by default, obviously. So the whole app here, for digital cash would work like this, as Tim describes. The initial home screen is your balance, nothing else. There is no account creation, no login, no seed phrases. It's just a screen with your balance on it. So say you have $100, that's what the screen says. You swipe left to reveal your QR code that allows others to send you cash. You swipe right to open your camera to scan someone else's QR code and send them cash. That's the entire app. No frills, no options. It's digital cash. And then the asset that it should be something like the most decentralized stablecoin, such as DAI, and it could be on a privacy L2 like Aztec network that enables these cheap, secure, and private payments as well. But then you may be wondering, like, and this is a question I had, but as I kept scrolling and read the thread, it's funny. Like, I had these questions. I'm like, okay, like, what about if you lose your wallet, for example? How would you get your cash back? Well, Tim answers that. He says, what if you lose your phone, right, where your wallet's stored? Tough luck. If you lose your wallet, your cash is gone. This is the same. So it really is meant to function exactly the same as cash, just in a digital form, where yeah, if you have $100 cash in your wallet and you lose your wallet, well, that's gone. There's no way you can go to get that back. The bank's not going to give you that back. You can't go to the bank and say, hey, I lost my wallet, give me my $100 back. That's not going to happen, right? You can't go to the police and ask for it. If the police find your wallet, sure, but it's the same concept. If you lose your phone, right, you lose access to those funds. There's no way to get them back. So it's the same thing as digital cash. Now, obviously, as physical cash, I should say. Obviously, you're not going to keep, your life savings on your person in physical cash, just like you wouldn't keep a substantial amount of crypto on your phone in this digital cash kind of wallet, right? So if we did get something like this, it was built to be fully private, working like Tim's described, I think it would be a huge value add to, I guess, the world, because it would mean that we get true digital cash that it doesn't inherit all the other stuff that comes with, I guess, blockchains like seed phrases and stuff like that. So definitely an interesting idea from Tim. I'll link his thread in the YouTube description below for you to check out. And for those of you who don't know who Tim is, he currently works at Balancer Labs. He's quite a smart guy. I've actually met up for lunch with him when he's been down in Melbourne. I've done that 2 times now, and it's just great chatting to him. He's definitely an Ethereum native. He definitely knows what he's talking about, and this was an interesting idea from him. So I'll link that thread in the YouTube description below for you to check out. But that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.